Throughout the Second World War, there were many evil SS commandants and commanders who operated the concentration camps. At sites such as Dachau and Buchenwald, evil reigns of terror were imposed by the guards, and at the top of the organisational hierarchy of these sites were the men who set the rules and ensured brutality and discipline was intertwined with violence, execution and mass killing. Some concentration camps were so large that they had different commandants who ran specific parts of the site. For example, at Auschwitz, Josef Kramer, the Beast of Belsen, was in charge of Birkenau, the extermination centre. But despite these men being responsible for the killings of over 6 million people, many of them were married, and their wives would live with them sometimes inside of the camps that they oversaw. A short distance away from the operation of mass murder, wives of the commandants would be preparing dinner or looking after children for their husbands to come home from a day of slaughter. Join us today as we look at the wives of the concentration camp commandants, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Rudolf Höss was a commandant of Auschwitz that oversaw its huge expansion, and he would be responsible for the deaths of over 1 million people. He would testify after the war about what was happening inside of the concentration camp, and he was executed for his crimes on a specially built gallows inside of Auschwitz. But he was married to a woman named Hedwig. The couple met after they were both part of the Arterman League, a group which protested urbanisation and favoured back-to-land policies, which promoted a farm-based lifestyle. The couple married on the 17th of August 1929, and they had 5 children, 2 sons and 3 daughters. Annegret, the youngest daughter, was even born at Auschwitz in November 1943. It was believed that Rudolf Höss protected his family from the horrors of the camps he oversaw, and he would consciously lie to his wife about what was going on. The family lived in a villa close by the camp, but Hedwig often referred to Auschwitz as paradise, and she did not lack or want for anything. Food and clothing was confiscated from the Jews' luggage, and it's believed that some of the wealth came back to the Höss household from this. Höss's daughter would later go on to say that her father was 2 people, one who would oversee Auschwitz, and the other a doting father that would hug and kiss his children before he went to work. Rudolf Höss continued to lie to his wife about gassings and mass killings, but one day she overheard comments made by Fritz Suhren, the Gauleiter of Silesia. He was explaining what went on at Auschwitz, the camp her husband was overseeing, and outraged, Hedwig was disgusted by her husband's actions. Because of this, she argued with him, and she refused to share the same bed with her husband. As the end of the war approached, Hedwig Höss moved north to Flensburg with her eldest son, and she was arrested there by the Allies. She was sent to the British Army's 92nd Field Security Section and was interrogated for weeks regarding her husband's whereabouts. She claimed that he was dead, however he was actually working on a farm and had changed his name to Fritz Lang in an attempt to evade capture. He also pretended to be a member of the Kriegsmarine, and he evaded capture for around a year, but was then arrested in Gotha-Ruppel in Germany in March 1946, after Hedwig finally relented and told the authorities where her husband could be found. She later remarried after her husband's execution and moved to America and lived until the age of 90. Josef Kramer was known as a Beast of Belsen and was a commandant of Auschwitz II-Birkenau and also Bergen-Belsen. He had been rather senior at various other concentration camps, but his work at Belsen saw the camp fall into ruin, with disease running rampant and riot across the site, with hundreds dying each day. Belsen became very overcrowded, and it was here where Anne Frank died. It's believed Kramer must have been responsible for more than 400,000 people's deaths, and he was married to Rosina Kramer. The pair were married on the 16th of October 1937, and Rosina would testify for her husband at his war crimes trial. She said, "Except for short intervals, I've always been with him, although of course when he was on duty, he was in the camp. I went inside the concentration camp on Sundays off-duty days. I went to Auschwitz in 1944, 2 weeks after my husband. The Commandant of Birkenau before my husband took over was Hauptsturmführer Hartgenstein. 3 days prior to my husband taking over, I asked Hartgenstein why my husband has been chosen for Auschwitz. His answer was because of the rank my husband held, and there was a general change of commands. She knew exactly what was going on inside the camps her husband oversaw, and she said when asked, 'Did you ever go to Belsen?' She replied, 'One Sunday afternoon, I went into the place where they were weaving, and my husband told me with great pride about the beautiful orchestra which was playing. He wanted to show me that. There was a band, but they had no instruments, so my husband asked for instruments from Auschwitz to be sent to Belsen, so that these girls should be able to play at least something. She would claim that her husband never treated anyone poorly, and that his duty was to take care of the inmates, which he did day and night. She also admitted she had knowledge of the gas chambers, and that her husband had admitted it was wrong what he was doing. But Josef Kramer was responsible for the scores of deaths, and the conditions at Belsen which caused horrific mass killing, and these were ultimately responsible to him. Rosina, following Josef's execution, would change her name and become a teacher, and she then retired and moved in with her son, and it's believed she lived in the area of Bergen-Belsen, close to the concentration camp her husband horrifically oversaw. One woman who was arguably more infamous than her husband was Ilse Koch, the wife of the Commandant of Buchenwald, Karl Otto Koch. Karl is remembered for being the man who oversaw a horrific concentration camp. However, he was prosecuted for embezzling money from the Nazis. For this, he was executed at his own camp. He and his wife, Ilse, built huge projects at Buchenwald for their own personal gain, including a huge horse-riding arena. In this, Ilse would parade on her horses, and if any prisoner looked at her, she would order them to be sent to their deaths. She was known for being involved in terrifying experiments, and she was also completely barbaric. Despite being the mere wife of a commandant, she became known as a witch of Buchenwald, and she beat many of the prisoners. After the war, Ilse Koch was placed on trial for her crimes, but was sentenced to prison time. However, this was reduced to 4 years, as there was an issue with proving if she selected inmates to be exterminated, so she could take their tattooed skin to make artefacts with. But then later in 1945 she was rearrested and was tried the following year. 250 witnesses testified against her, and she was then sentenced to life imprisonment for her crimes. A forgotten commandant of Auschwitz is Arthur Lieber-Henschel. Much is documented about Rudolf Höss, but Lieber-Henschel was a man who succeeded Höss when he was forced away briefly from the camp. He continued the mass exterminations and executions, but removed torture devices such as the standing cells, and also stopped the selections of regular prisoners. He was regarded as much more lenient in his running of the camp, but still thousands of people were dying each week under his command. He was married to his first wife, a woman named Gertrude, and they had 1 son and 3 daughters. The youngest daughter was born in 1943, shortly before her father became the commandant of Auschwitz. Her mother was awarded the Bronze Mother's Cross by Hitler to women who had 4 or more children. The story of Gertrude, Arthur Lieber-Henschel's first wife, is tragic. She lost her husband to another woman, was then arrested at the end of the war, being the wife of an SS officer. She then suffered with her mental health and was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, and she was placed inside a mental health facility. Lieber-Henschel's second wife, Anneliese, gave birth to a son, and little is known about her. It's unclear how much these women knew about their husband's involvement in Auschwitz, and specifically his work that he did there. An SS officer who served as a commandant of a number of concentration camps was Max Koegel. Koegel would be in charge of Lichtenburg, Ravensbrück, Majdanek and also Flossenburg, and he was seen as a reliable and efficient killer. He was involved in the installation of gas chambers at Majdanek, but he also oversaw the labour camp for women at Lichtenburg, and then the all-female concentration camp of Ravensbrück. He married Anna Zilesek when he was an adjutant with the SS at Dachau. Anna wrote she had aspired to become a professional singer, but blamed her father's Jewish employer for their financial hardship, which forced her to become a receptionist and a nursery school teacher. She worked as a waitress where she first met Max Koegel, and Anna went with him to a number of different concentration camps. They were the first residents in the Commandant's house at Ravensbrück, which was a newly built large villa with a big garden sat on a ridge overlooking the site. She was described by the prisoners there as an unpleasant character, and during one event when she went to the hair salon at Ravensbrück, she said the workers were disgusting. After the war, Koegel died by his own hand, and Anna remarried. Fritz Suhren was also the commandant of Ravensbrück concentration camp, and his policies were to exterminate the women through working them to death without feeding them much food. He gave prisoners over for experimentation, but his wife, Elfriede, was a different woman. She was a seamstress and married Fritz Suhren when he was a lowly SS personnel officer. But when he became the commandant of Ravensbrück, The couple moved into the villa on the ridge. His wife was softly spoken and was very faithful to her husband. It's not entirely known what crimes she committed, if any, at the camp, but Suhren, after the war, was captured. He was tried and was executed for his crimes, but Elfriede stayed loyal to her husband and approached many former prisoners to testify on his behalf. However, after her husband's execution, she even approached his former mistress and said she should apply for an orphan's pension for the daughter she had with Suhren. She was a rather loyal lady, but very strange. The wives of the commandants of the concentration camps lived rather bizarre lives. For example, Rudolf Höss's wife was seemingly living a normal life, whilst her husband went to work and committed murder and slaughter on an industrial scale. They had a varied involvement in the camps where their husbands ruled over with an iron fist, and many of the wives of the commandants were seen as witches or as evil cogs in the system. Ilse Koch, for example, spent the majority of her life after the war behind bars, but others would find sanctuary in different countries and live under different names. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.